Project templates and stage templates are a very important part of Studiometry. First things first, what are project and stage templates? A project template is a saved group of settings and items that can be easily applied to new projects. When you create a new project in Studiometry, you have the option to select a project template. What that will do is pre-populate your new project with various different settings based on the selected template, including the project's category, notes, assigned employees and roles, to-dos, specs, blueprints, and stage templates. Now, if you don't know what all these things mean, that's totally fine. We're going to go over them all later in this video. So we can see here that stage templates are just a part of your project templates. Stage templates are used to create what's called your project's pipeline. Your pipeline will consist of any number of stages, which can be set up using your stage templates. Your pipeline is what's used in the planning and Gantt chart sections of Studiometry. Now, project and stage templates are what you might consider advanced features, and you don't have to use them. But if you do use them, it can save you a lot of time when you're setting up new projects. So let's get started. We will begin by going to Studiometry's Preferences window and going to the Project Template section. So how this window works is it will display all of your project templates on the left here, and when you select one, it will show all of that template's information on the right. Now, this database doesn't have any project templates yet, so we're going to create a new one for this video. To do that, we'll click on the plus button below the list of project templates, and then we can click on the name to rename it. Okay, so all those different settings that we talked about earlier that you can set up on your project templates, your to-dos, your specs, categories, notes, blueprints, employees, and stage pipelines, those are all right here. So when you select a project template, you can customize all of that stuff in this section right here. So we'll just start at the top and work our way to the bottom here, and we'll figure out what each of these settings are and what we can do with them in relation to a project template. So first up is the to-do suite. So to-dos are used in Studiometry to track any tasks that need to be done for a project, and you've probably used them by now, but to-do suites are just groups of to-dos. What you can do with to-do suites is you can add them to projects. If you have a group of, say, 5 or 6 to-dos that you always do for a certain type of project, you can create that as a suite in Studiometry and then add it to projects. So what we can do here is select a to-do suite that will automatically be applied to a new project. First, I'll show you where you can customize your to-do suites so that we know where this list is pulling its information from. So to get to the to-do suite editing window, we go to the File menu and then select Suites, and then we select Edit to-do suites. And this will bring up this window. And we can see here we have 3 suites in Studiometry, and this suite, for example, web page, has 2 to-dos added to it. But we can add new suites and add as many to-dos as we'd like to a suite. But really, the whole point of to-do suites is you can add a group of to-dos to a client or a project with just the click of one button, as opposed to having to go in and type all of this different information in every time you want to add that group. So it's really just a group of to-dos. So I'll cancel out of here and then go back to Studiometry's Preferences window. And then when I open up this menu, we can see those 3 to-do suites are available to select. Now if we select none, then obviously no to-dos will be added to the project by default. But if we select a to-do suite here, then that to-do suite will automatically be added to the project when it's created using this project template. Next up is the spec suite selection. Now, similar to how a to-do suite is just a group of to-dos that you can add to a client or project, a spec suite is just a group of specs that you can add to a client or project. If you don't know what specs are, they're just basically any field or information that you want to add to a client or project that isn't built in as a default field in Studiometry. So for a project, you can enter in the name and the ID and all of that. That's built into Studiometry. But if you have a lot of different fields that you want to track that Studiometry doesn't track by default, you can add them as specs. And so your spec suites are just groups of specs. And to show you where this list is pulling from, we're going to go to the spec suite editing window. To get there, we go to the File menu, and we select Suites, Edit Spec Suites. And this brings up the spec suite editing window. Here we can see we also have 3 spec suites, and each spec suite has a few specs within it. So basically how this works is if you're in a project and you wanted to add this suite to the project, it would add these 3 specs to your project. It's basically just groups of specs. That's all it is. So we can, again here, we can create more suites and add items to suites, and it's really just groups of fields that we may want to add to a client or project. So I'll close this and go back to the preferences window, and then we can select a spec suite. And again, if we select none here, then there won't be any additional specs added to the project. So we can do that at any later point, but the whole point of the project template is when you create a project, you want this stuff just to be in there automatically without having to think, oh, I need to go back and add a spec suite or a to-do suite or change the category. That's really the whole reason for the project template, is to set up as much of it as you can beforehand, so when you go in and create a project, it's done for you. Next is the category. Now, if we pull this up, we can see we have our list of project categories here. Your project categories can be set in the preferences window under categories and rates. You can see them down here under project categories. And there's a separate tutorial video for what all of this stuff is and what it means. But really, you can just maintain a list of different project categories. And in your project templates, you can pre-assign one of those categories based on the template. So as we can see here, we're kind of going along with the web page theme. We're going to automatically select website as this project category. So whenever we select this project template, which why don't we just rename it to website template. Now, whenever we create a new project and we select this template, it's going to start filling in all of these things for us automatically. Next up is notes. Now, if I click edit here, this will just bring up a window where we can type in some notes. Anything that we type into here will be added to the project's notes when we create a new project using this template. So remember this, because we'll see it later when we go to the project notes, but when I hit OK, it will save those notes. If I hit edit again, it'll bring the window back up with the notes that I've saved to the template. But this is just a way to pre-populate any notes that you might want to add to a project that would be created using this project template. Next up are blueprints. Now, blueprints are used in Studiometry to add commonly used work and expense items to your projects. So you can have a list of blueprints in Studiometry that you can add to your existing projects, or you can add blueprints to your project templates. And what this will do is, if we add blueprints to this project template, then once the project is created, it will already have some work and expense items in it. So we have a completely separate tutorial video on blueprints, which you can see at movies.orange.net. But for now, we're going to add a couple of blueprints to this project template. Just like with the to-do and spec suites, we can see our list of blueprints in the program by going to the File menu, Suites menu, and then selecting Blueprints. And this brings up the Blueprints window. So in this Studiometry database, we can see we have 3 blueprints. And what these are just basically work items that we can easily add to one or more projects. So if, for example, we always use a server setup fee in a lot of project types, we can create it here as a blueprint, and then we can easily add it to a project, and that will just create a copy of the blueprint on the project in the work and expenses section. So we're not going to go into details about how to create blueprints. You can watch the blueprint tutorial for that if you're interested. But for now, we're going to show you how you can add your blueprints to your project templates. So I'll close back out of this window, and then I'm going to hit the Edit button within the project template section of the Preferences window. And this brings up the Blueprint Adding window. Now let's say for my website template, I always want to add in maintenance fees and server setup fees. So I just hit the plus button and I've added 2 of these blueprints. And what this is going to do is, whenever I create a new project using my website template, it'll automatically add these 2 work items to that project. So when I hit save, we can see blueprints. There are 2 linked blueprints. And next is employees. If I click on this edit button here, it brings us the assigned employees window. What we can do is basically pre-assign employees based on the project template. So if for our website template, we always have a specific employee who does a certain role for that project, we can assign it to the template so that we don't have to go in after we create a new project and assign that employee. So I'll just do that really quickly. I'll add a couple of employees and a couple of roles to this project template. And then I'll hit OK. And then we can see here that 2 employees are assigned to this project template. Okay, so before we get into the stage templates and the stage pipeline, let's just kind of go back over what we've done here by creating a new project and then seeing how all of this information is filled in when we create that new project. So I'm just going to close out of the Preferences window really quick, and then in the main window I'm going to go to the bottom left and click the plus button and then select New Project, and this brings up the New Project window. And we can see right here there's a field for project templates. So if I click on this, the website template that we created is now available. Now you can see below this there are some other options: web page, print, and photo session. Any to-do suite or spec suite that you have in the program, you can also just select those here, and all that will do is just apply the to-do or spec suite based on the name to a new project. So you can select a project template, which will include the category and the notes and the employees and all of those settings, or you can just select a to-do or spec suite from the bottom of this list. So I'm going to select the template that we created and give the project a name. And then I'm going to hit Create Project. So let's go over everything that was automatically added to this project, because as we can see here, there's a lot of information in the project already, and all I did was create it. The website category was automatically selected because we had that in the project template. Also, these two employees and their roles were automatically assigned. We can see in the specs here that this spec suite was automatically added to the project, and we can also see that they need to be entered because they haven't actually been entered yet. So it kind of gives us a prompt that we need to enter some specs. We can see that the to-do suite was also added, and the two blueprints that we added to the project template are added here. And last but not least, I'm actually going to customize how this project overview looks so that we can see the project notes in here. To do that, I'll click on the gear icon below the project overview and select Customize Overview. And then up here, I'm going to check Text Notes. And then when I hit Done, we can scroll up to the top and see that those detailed notes that we entered into the project template now appear within the project. So these were automatically also added to the project from the project template. So one other thing that we should note is that if you do change a project template in the future, it won't affect projects that you've already created. So if I go and change the spec suite or the to-do suite or any of the notes that are associated with the project template, it won't change this project since this has already been created. So now let's go back to Studiometry's Preferences window and go to the Project Template section and select our template again. And now let's go over the stage pipeline and stage templates. So before we do that, let's just go over what stages are in a project. Now, we already know that projects can have statuses. If I go to the categories and rates section, we can see our project statuses, and they're kind of just from start to finish the status of the project. But the thing is, this is a global list of project statuses. Every project can have one of these statuses at a time, and that's it. And we can't customize this list on a per project basis. When we change this list, it changes it for the entire Studiometry app. Stages, on the other hand, you can set up a stage pipeline for a project that is unique to that project. So if I go back to the project template, we can set up as many stages in here as we'd like for each project. And that will help you kind of track that project from start to finish in terms of what needs to be done for that project and where you're at on the project. So in addition to the project status, you can also track separately the project stage. Now again, you don't need to use stages if you can't really find a use for them. They're just an added feature that's there if you need it. So let's just kind of go into this by creating a couple of stage templates and seeing how that creates a pipeline for the project. So to do this, I'm going to hit on the Edit Stage Templates button, and this brings up the Stage Template window. And in this window, we can create stage templates that can be used in one or more of your project templates. So we can create a stage template that's used in multiple different project templates. So for example, if our setup phase is always exactly the same no matter what the project template is, we can just create that as one stage template and then easily add it to multiple project templates. So it's a way to kind of make it a little easier when you're creating multiple project templates by creating stage templates. So I'm going to click the plus button here to create the first stage template, and we'll name this stage setup. We're going to skip over these settings at the top right now, but we'll come back to them later to explain what they do. But at first, we're going to kind of go into what we do at the bottom of the window. Down here, we can add items to our stage template. And the two types of items that you can add are a Gantt item, which is just a planning item, or a to-do. So if you don't know what Gantt means, a Gantt chart is just a way to plan a project where you can see dependencies and milestones and basically the stage that you're on and what needs to be done. It can be a pretty complex way of planning projects, but you have a lot more detail and control over what you can see. Studiometry can create Gantt charts, and you can do all of that and set it all up with your stage templates. So we're going to just basically be creating one Gantt item for each stage just so we have a visual representation of the stage on the Gantt chart. It kind of sounds confusing right now, but you'll probably understand it once we create a project using this project template. So let's add a Gantt item to this stage template and a couple of to-dos. Now we can see here, Studiometry kind of tells us that these to-dos being underneath this Gantt item are linked to that Gantt item. And what that means is that the progress of this Gantt item will update based on the completion of these to-dos. So Studiometry will automatically calculate how much progress has been done on this item based on the completion of the to-dos. So I'm just going to enter some names for these items. So we have a couple of items set up here, and we can go into a little more detail now about these settings at the top and the extra settings that we have for the individual items on the stage template. So these two to-dos we have here, we know that to-dos have due dates in Studiometry. And these due dates for these items are going to be determined based on the start date of this stage template. Now, if we have multiple stage templates in our project pipeline, they'll basically be ordered one after the other. So each stage template will have a set amount of days, and then the next stage will start when the stage prior to it has completed. So what that really means here is if we look at this default days long field, for this stage template, if we set the days long to be 5, then the next stage in the pipeline will start 5 days after this stage begins. So this will automatically push all of the to-dos and the Gantt items back for the next stage by 5 days. So we have 5 days to work with to put all of these items in. And then we can see here if we select a to-do, we have days from stage beginning. So whenever this stage begins, we can push back each individual item. So if we set it as 0, then the due date for this to-do is going to be the exact same as the start date for this stage. The same goes for any Gantt item. We have days from stage beginning, and we can push back any of these items based on the beginning of this stage template. So really it's all relative where we set up the duration of the template and then we just set how far back we want to push each individual item. The only other thing to mention is that for Gantt items you have a duration or a days long. And since we're only going to be adding one Gantt item for this stage, I'll just make it as long as the stage itself and I'll say 5 days. Now in terms of other settings that we have here, Gantt items you can have them be a milestone or just a standard Gantt item. And what a milestone is it will appear differently on your Gantt chart. It will show up with a big checkbox showing that you've reached the milestone. But we're just going to create this as a standard Gantt item. And then in addition to that, you can also link Gantt items with other Gantt items, but we won't be doing that in this tutorial. And also a couple more settings for to-dos. For each to-do, you can change the priority, and you can automatically assign employees for each to-do within your stage template. So you have some customizability for the items before they're even created. So right now, when I'm going to hit OK to save this stage template, and what this is going to do is save all the settings that we have here and create a new stage template. So we can see it here. So let's create one more stage template really quickly, and then we'll add them to the project templates pipeline. So to create another stage template, we'll just click on the plus button again, and then we'll add some information into this window. Okay, so we've done that. Now let's talk about these two settings up here. The first one is Auto Advanced Stage, and what that means is, remember before we created a Gantt item and then 2 to-do items, and here we have a Gantt item and 3 to-do items. If we have Auto Advanced Stage checked, what Studiometry will do is when all the to-do and Gantt items for a stage are completed, then Studiometry will try to automatically advance that project to the next stage. So we'll show you how that works once we use the stage template, but this is really just Studiometry will automatically advance to the next stage for you instead of you having to go in and move it to the next stage manually. And you can set this setting for each stage template. So if there are certain stages where you always want to review them, you can just disable Auto Advanced Stage. And if there's a stage where whenever everything down here is completed, you always move to the next stage, then you'll just leave this enabled. And now let's talk about this link first possible Gantt item to last Gantt item of previous stage checkbox. What this will try to do is if we have a Gantt item in our stage template here, it will attempt to link it with the last Gantt item that was listed in the previous stage template. Now, if Gantt items have to-dos associated with them, you can't have them dependent on other Gantt items. But if we just had a free-floating Gantt item at the end of the last stage template and one at the beginning of this stage template, then we could actually have our stage templates all linked to each other. So that's a little more advanced technique, and if you have any questions about that, please feel free to get a hold of us at support.oranged.net. So for now, I'm going to save this stage template, and now we can see we have two. And then I'm just going to create one final stage template, and we'll just call it completed. And I'm not even going to add in any template requirements. It's just going to be a stage on the project. So when I hit OK, now we have 3 stage templates. Now what we can do with these is add them to our project templates. So I'm going to close this window, and we're back in the Preferences window Project Template section. And now just make sure that we have a template selected here, and then we can build the project templates stage pipeline. Now to do that, it's very easy now that we've created our stage templates. All we have to do is hit the Add Stage button, and then we can select which stage that we want to add. So I can add Setup, and then I'll add Development, and then I'll add Completed. Now, these pipeline stages, we can rearrange them and put them in whatever order we want. But once we create the project, they'll be created in this order, and basically the stages will go one after the other. So this project will obviously start with setup, then go through development, and then completed. So this is a pretty simplistic stage pipeline, but obviously you can set it up to be much more complex if you have more details that you need to track when you're planning your projects. So now I'm going to create a new project using this template again. So I'm going to close out of the Preferences window, and I'm going to click the plus button and select New Project. And then I will select the project template from the list, and I'll name the project. And one other thing we want to pay attention to while we're in this window is the start date. Now when we set up the project template with all of those stage templates, the stage templates, they'll have days long values, and those days will all start based on the project start date. So the first stage template will start on May 10th in this example, and since it was 5 days long, the second stage template would start 5 days after that. So this date is where the entire project will start, and then each stage will push the stage after it back by however many days long it is. So let's hit Create Project. So again, it did everything that it did before, where it filled out, the category, and it assigned the employees, and it added our notes and specs and to-dos, but it also added the planning here. So if I go to this planning section, which we can also go to, if we come up here, we can click on this menu and go to the planning and Gantt section, but this is the project planning section. So we can see at the top a visual representation of our stages and what the current stage is. And then below that, we can see any required items for the current stage. So you get basically a good view of where you're at in your project and what needs to be done. Down here, this is what's called the Gantt chart. This is a very simple one that only has 2 items in it. But we can see that there's our setup stage and our development stage, and these are the 2 Gantt items that we created. So we can see that all of this was added just by selecting that project template when we created a new project. Now to use this, it's very simple and it's pretty easy. If we're in this planning section and we start to do work on the project, we can check off the items that we complete, and we can see how it updates. We had 2 items that were associated with this setup stage item, and now that one of them is completed, it's marked as 50% complete. When I mark this next one as completed, not only will this Gantt item be 100% complete, but because we set the stage template to auto advance stages, when we check this, it'll automatically advance from setup to development. So I'll check that off, and then we can see there. That was marked as completed, and we've moved to the next stage. So now that we're in this stage, obviously we can check off the items as we work on them. And then when that's done, we can see the project's completed. So that's a pipeline, a very simplistic one, but that's how you can set it up. And the great part about this is these pipelines are customizable by project. So you can set up for each project how you want to plan it out, the individual stages, and you can actually edit and customize these stages even after you've created it as well. So you have a lot more flexibility in terms of what you can do with the stage of a project than you do if we go back to the project overview. We scroll all the way to the top, you can see The status of the project, we just have this small list here. So for stages, you have pretty much a customizable list that you can create for each project to help you plan it and kind of figure out where it's at and where it's going. So those are project and stage templates. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to get a hold of us at support.oranged.net.